Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Russell Ray. I'm the editor of the Journal Record, and welcome to our latest edition of our Roundtable discussion hosted by the Journal Record. Our topic today is medical marijuana, specifically banking issues or the lack of banking surrounding this latest industry. Back in June of last year, voters approved the legalization of marijuana, and earlier this year, the Oklahoma legislature approved the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana and Patient Protection Act, also known as the Unity Bill, and I believe that bill actually takes effect starting tomorrow on Friday, August 30th. This new law establishes a wide range of rules for medical marijuana businesses involved in the growth, the distribution, and the sale of medical cannabis products in the state. It covers testing, covers labeling, covers packaging, employer rights, employee rights, and a whole host of other issues. But what the Unity Bill does not address is the need for basic banking services. That's because the use of medical marijuana is illegal, remains illegal under federal law. This is a complicated, dangerous situation for businesses in this industry. This is a cash-only business, and many of these businesses are forced to hire 24/7 security. The use of armored trucks, I'm told, is on the rise. And banks are looking for the assurances they need to begin offering services to an industry doing business in nearly 30 states now. The Safe Banking Act is now in committee in Congress. This bipartisan bill would prevent federal regulators from sanctioning banks for working with illegal cannabis businesses. I actually spoke to Congressman Tom Cole yesterday about this bill. He feels that this bipartisan legislation has the votes it needs to get through the House. He's not so sure about the Senate, and he's not so sure that it would be signed by President Trump. So I think that sets the stage up for our discussion. We have our staff at the Journal Record has done an outstanding job of recruiting our panel today, and let's go ahead and meet our panel. I think the way we'll do it, we'll just go down the line here. If you'll introduce yourself, your title, company, and what you do. We'll start with you, Jason.
All right, my name is Jason Kreth. I'm a partner at the law firm of Phillips Murrah. I do primarily litigation work, banking litigation as well as general litigation, but I also am the main person in our firm who deals with cannabis law.
Very good. Christina.
My name is Christina Ferguson. I am the owner of CRF Accounting Solutions, and we are more or less an outsourcing firm for operational accounting for cannabis businesses.
I am Charles Griffin. I am Director of Retail Banking for First Fidelity Bank. So I run all of our retail branches in Oklahoma and Arizona, as well as a large portion of our marijuana-related businesses and our money services businesses that we bank at First Fidelity.
All right, well, thank you. If you could please join me in welcoming our panel and thanking them for our valuable time today. All right. Well, let's. I mentioned the Safe Banking Act. Let's start with that. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about the act? Can you define it? Tell us what it's about, what it will do, and why this legislation is so important today.
Yeah, the Safe Banking Act is really kind of the latest attempt to allow banks to handle cannabis-related business. The SAFE part of it stands for the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act, in case anyone was curious. Without getting too deep into the weeds, the status of being able to use a bank for just normal services such as holding an account is somewhat in question because of the difference between federal and state law on the legality of cannabis. The Safe Banking Act is an attempt to try to fix this. It basically says that a banking regulator can't take any adverse action against a bank if they deal in legal marijuana business accounts. Mm-hmm. It also keeps the bank itself from being liable under any federal law mm-hmm. for handling those types of businesses. Again, it only applies to legal marijuana businesses. If the state doesn't legalize it, the Safe Banking Act wouldn't protect.
Very good. So I think I mentioned about 30 states now have some form of legal marijuana. Many people believe that something like the Safe Banking Act, we will inevitably need to provide a safe environment for these businesses. So let me ask a follow-up question to that. How likely is it that the Safe Banking Act will pass at some point?
I mean, I think it's inevitable that some piece of legislation down the road will accomplish what the Safe Banking Act is trying to do. There's a sea change in public opinion in regards to the use of legal cannabis. And so I think eventually we will get something that clarifies these laws. With regard to the Safe Banking Act, it's a little more in question given the current administration. The Democrats are in control of the House, and it's pretty clear that the Safe Banking Act will likely pass the House. There are, I believe, over 100 co-sponsors of the bill. Some of those are even Republicans. The bigger question is, will it pass the Senate, which is Republican-controlled? And even if it passes the Senate, will the president be willing to sign it? And all of those questions are very much up in the air. And if I had to put odds on it, I would say it's doubtful at this time that it will pass the Senate, but at some point in the future, I expect something like this will.
Mm-hmm. Charles, you got any thoughts about the federal legislation or the need for some sense of legislation at some point in the future?
I do think that legislation, specifically SAFE, makes a lot of sense as far as the way it goes, because it doesn't hinder states that don't want to legalize marijuana. It simply does not address that issue at all. It handles the banking portion of it to try and encourage additional banking that's out there. I do think that as they continue to add things to that Safe Banking Act as it goes through all these committees, that's part of what slows down exactly what Jason was saying, why I think it's going to get stopped and stalled.
Christine, you have any thoughts about the federal legislation moving through Congress?
Honestly, it's very necessary. We need to be able to have a bank account in order for us to keep track of the funds accurately.
Yeah. Now, Charles, your bank, First Fidelity, is the only bank in the state that offers these types of services right now to medical marijuana businesses?
I don't think we're the only bank in the state. I do know that there's at least a credit union doing it. I think other banks are starting to try to understand it.
But you're one of the few.
One of the few.
Yeah. So why is First Fidelity offering these types of services when other banks are not providing those services?
So we started banking marijuana about 5 years ago in Arizona when it passed there. I think something that's very important to us is to make sure that we serve the community, and I do think that these are legitimate businesses with legitimate needs. They need to do the same thing everyone else does. But it also helps the community in the fact that it takes cash out of those industries, out of those businesses, and puts them back in the Federal Reserve where they should be. It makes it safer around there. We don't worry about people with guns then going into dispensaries or grow facilities and taking those things. I think there's a responsibility that we have to bank our community fairly and evenly, and as long as the citizens of the state have said it, our job and our role is to make sure that we're providing those services to the people out there that need them. So we're doing our best.
So in the meantime, without a law, how do you go about managing the money and handling it? Let me turn to you, Christina. How do medical marijuana companies track funds without a banking account?
So obviously without a bank account, we're dealing with cash, which is very difficult to track. It's just like having $100 in your purse and then you wonder where it went a couple of days later. So what we've found that actually does work in place of a bank register is that we have what we call a cash log. It's not complex. It can be an Excel spreadsheet where you say, okay, on this date, I took out $50 for marketing and I still have $550 in the safe. And so then you just do that every time you either put in money or take out money from your safe, and that will act as your bank register. However, it is very, very time consuming, and you must stay on top of it. So where a bank account is taking out human error, a cash log is allowing that human error to actually come in, and people make mistakes. But that is the best way that we found so far, and it does work out rather well as long as you stick to it.
To dig a little bit deeper into that, what do you think are some of the challenges of bookkeeping in the cannabis industry?
So, of course, first and foremost, the fact that we are more or less a cash industry. That's very difficult for an accountant because we're not there every day. And so if you don't adhere to your cash log, or you just happen to forget about a business expense, we don't know about it. That would probably be the number one challenge. And then, of course, we do have our larger companies where they will transfer money from vault to vault, meaning you have a ton of money in cash, and so you need multiple safes in order to keep track of that money. And when we're running intercompany entries in between those vaults and in between different companies, that makes it increasingly complex and honestly very difficult even for the owner to read the financial statements.
Very good. Let me turn back to you, Jason. Obviously, the use of medical marijuana is illegal under federal law. It's legal in some capacity in about 30 states. Can you describe the current legality of marijuana as it exists today?
Sure. In Oklahoma, and this goes by state, we approved a medical marijuana program, as we're all aware. The big difficulty legally with this is that on the federal level, as you said, it's still legal. Under the Controlled Substances Act, marijuana is a Schedule I drug, which, according to the federal government, means that it has no medical value and has a high potential for abuse. And because of that, because there's a conflict between state and federal law, there becomes some ambiguity on the legality of it at a state level. Because traditionally, where there is a conflict, the federal law will generally take precedence.
I see. But what kind of legal hurdles do medical marijuana businesses face in banking nowadays?
It's, as has already been discussed, the main problem is that there aren't many banks willing to do it. And the reason for that is because of, again, this conflict with federal law. The Controlled Substance Act can potentially be used to find a bank liable for violations of it by an individual if they help take the money. There's also the Bank Secrecy Act that's in effect, which can potentially hold a bank liable for money laundering if they take money from an illegal enterprise. So both of those things combined lead a lot of banking institutions to just stay away from the field entirely. And the few that do, such as First Fidelity, face a lot of administrative headaches in managing those accounts.
Charles, let me turn back to you. Let's say a marijuana business wants to open an account at First Fidelity. What is it that such a business needs to provide to the bank to secure an account at First Fidelity?
Truly what we're going to ask for, and it varies from state to state, but we're going to ask for anything that they have to submit to the state in order to get their license. We need to see a copy of that, truly. And then anything the state submits back to them, we're going to want a copy of that. So you're going to get your license from Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. You're going to get your OMMA license back. So we want copies of all of those things to ensure that we are aware of what's happening. And that's part of the problem with the vagaries and the way the law is and the guidance that we've gotten, what limited guidance we've gotten, is they've kind of actually put banks in the position of verifying things that the state has already verified. Because we are supposed to know without a doubt, and many of these things the state won't share themselves because it's private information, so we're doing double work on top of it. It continues to be fairly complicated in the documents that we need and the things that we're going to ask for. There's a lot.
So let's say I come to you and I want to open an account. What kind of costs should I expect to pay for those types of services?
So we have a monthly cost. There are different ways that the institutions I've seen are doing it. We have a monthly cost, and we charge $1,000 a month for a tier 1 account, and accounts are tiered based on how they touch the product and who they are, and it goes all the way down to an account that's $50 a month for those people who are on the fringes of that conversation or the fringes of that touching. So it's $1,000 a month, and then the same fees that we would any other business. And quite frankly, we run you once we've vetted you and you're in, like any other business that we have.
So up to $1,000 a month. Why is it so high?
The regulators and the guidance that we've gotten is so complicated that this is the only industry I've actually seen them suggest that we have a certain number of people for a certain number of counts, based on the kind of due diligence that they believe we should be doing. And the due diligence doesn't stop when you open the account. It is an ongoing monthly process of reviewing and looking at backgrounds and continuing to monitor these accounts and these institutions once we bring them on. And so it is a very labor-intensive process.
You mentioned the tiers. How do you go about deciding which tier a business would fall under?
So most banks out there now, and ours included, have taken. There's been guidance, but it's been spotty and not significant. So there was a suggestion in some of the guidance that we got that spoke about tiering these things down to make sure that we understand what each of these entities looks like. So basically, if you touch the product in your tier 1 entity, and you're going to get the most exam, the most due diligence. If you're a supporting entity out there and more than half of your income is coming from the industry, then you're going to be a tier 2 is what we call that. All the way down to tier 3 entities out there. So an accounting firm that has 2 or 3 marijuana-related businesses in it, but does not take the majority of its income from that industry, is a tier 3, and we still have to monitor them, but it is much less than we have to on someone who is actually physically touching that product.
Very good. I mentioned the Unity bill earlier. The legislature approved it in the last legislative session, and overall the reports that I've heard is that the legislature did a fairly decent job in putting together the rules in place for this new industry. I'd like to hear from all of you. If you had to give the legislature a grade on its work with the Unity bill, what kind of grade would you give them? Can I start with you, Jason?
I'd say probably a B. It's a fairly good piece of legislation. The original had a lot of holes and inconsistencies in it that created a lot of questions for the work we do in helping guide clients through kind of the administrative headaches of getting licensed. I don't know that it solves everything, but it's definitely, I think, a step in the right direction. Hopefully the legislature continues to tweak the bill and change things as the playing field changes.
There's more to come, I think, in the trailer bills, I think, that need to be resolved. Christina, what are your thoughts on the legislature's performance and the rules they put in place for this new industry?
So I would say a C or a B, honestly. You can tell that they're trying to get in the right direction, just as you said, Jason. I do have quite a few clients that still have quite a few questions, and honestly, part of the Unity bill is causing administrative headaches, and it's also causing some unforeseen expenses when they started.
Yeah. What kind of unforeseen expenses?
Well, first and foremost, seed-to-sale software. Which is insanely important if you are a medium to large company. But if you're, let's say, a mom and pop grow and you have 20 plants, we don't really need $1,000 seed to sale.
For our audience, can you explain what the seed to sale platform is, what that is, and what they're required to do?
So by the time they get it moving, it's going to be an incredible portion of the bill, honestly. Basically, there's going to be, from what I understand, I'm far from an expert, but there's going to be a software that they choose. and then all the other seed to sale software can then flow in to that software, relieving a lot of the OMMA report headache that's happening around the 15th of the month. And so that will be huge for a lot of clientele, and even my firm.
Yeah. And so that aspect actually is not going into effect tomorrow. I think that's an element of the rules that will happen in the future. Jason, you got any thoughts about the whole seed to sale requirements and how that's going to impact businesses?
It's definitely going to be an increased cost. I think at the end of the day, I'm going to have to wait and see what the software actually ends up looking like for our clients and how easy everything works. It's a decent idea, but once the rubber meets the road, things can change and be a lot more difficult than anyone expected.
Yeah, yeah. Christina, let me turn back to you. What's a good way to budget with a cash-only business?
So the best way that we found so far is with a cash-only business, if you basically break up your cash into 2 or 3 or 4 different safes. I wouldn't suggest any more than honestly 3 or 4. It gets very complex from there. But basically you have one safe that holds the majority of your money, just like a bank account would. I mean, it's just money sitting there. So let's say you have $50,000 in that safe. Then you have another safe that's specifically meant for your operating expenses. You're buying product, you're paying rent, whatever, you're paying your employees. And that's going to be your second safe. That way you have it split out. You know, in this safe I have $50,000. You don't have to count that every night, relieving some of the administrative burden. And then you have a much lower or smaller amount, I suppose, in that second safe, which is much easier to reconcile out at the end of the day. And then also we found that if you just take, like, say, a cash bag and put a label on it, sales tax, marijuana tax, payroll tax, and you just put away that money either every day or every week, then there's no surprises at either the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and that tends to help people out quite a bit as well.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you, Christina. Jason, are there issues with credit card processing?
Yeah, there are. You run into much the same issues with credit card processing as you do with banking in general. Most of the major credit card processing companies won't touch this stuff for fear of getting dragged into the same legal problems with the Controlled Substances Act or the Banking Secrecy Act. I have heard of at least one company that has created kind of a novel way to deal with this, and I haven't seen it challenged legally to know whether or not it'll hold up, but their process to the customer looks like a normal credit card transaction. You come in, you swipe your card, you buy the product, you go. But what it actually does behind the scenes is it has the customer purchase a digital gift card for the location, and then it immediately redeems that gift card for the sale or for the purchase you're trying to buy. So if you're buying $50 in product, it rings up a $50 gift card, charges a gift card fee, and then immediately redeems it to the store. So it appears like a credit card transaction, even though it's not quite.
I see. Charles, what are some of the ongoing obligations that an account holder must adhere to if they have an account with your bank?
So some of the things that I think are key, and maybe I have a little different view on the seed to sell. I think it's vastly important for banking.
Yeah, go ahead and address that. Yeah.
So I think when you start down that's some of the stuff that we're asking for. We look for monthly reports, the same reports they're given to OMMA right now, to understand what the sales look like and what their volumes look like. Jason mentioned the anti-money laundering laws earlier. That's one of the key factors for us being able to bank you, is to not only identify if what you're doing seems to match the size of your store, your clientele, your base, but also to understand if there are drastic changes in what you're doing, if there are drastic changes in the industry. If I see a bank or an entity for us all of a sudden double their size over the course of 2 months, now I have to wonder, I have to understand that double, right? Why do they have?
Why is that happening? And it's important that every transaction is recorded and accounted for.
Exactly. And so I think those things are things we're asking for, those reporting things that you have to supply to the states, the different states that we're in. We continue to look for and make sure that our clients report any changes in their ownership, any changes in their staffing. We go out and do background checks on anyone who has access to the funds in the account. We need to know if we have, potential bad actors out there, and it's, quite frankly, there are times where people hire an individual and they do a background check. Ours is probably deeper, and we find things that they didn't even know they had hired. So I think those are important aspects of the things that we look for. One thing that we ask for continuously is just candid information back from those entities. So if you know of changes, if you have changes, we need to be aware of it as soon as you're aware of it. I think those are those ongoing things that we're going to ask for. And then again, every year licenses renew. So the same stuff that you guys supplied when we got it the first time, I have to see again, because it's a renewal. I have to understand that the state still approves you and that you are still a valid entity out there for me to be able to bank. So
really sounds like it's really unclear whether or not we're going to have a law in place to start providing these banking services to businesses. Do you suspect that we'll see more banks start providing these types of services as the wait for a federal law continues? Will more banks be willing to take the risk as you are doing now?
I think there are some that are considering it now. I hope they do. I think the more banks that do this, the better off we are in this community. Our name got out there pretty early in the process. We're still working through the initial referrals. We had 400 referrals within a day. That takes a long time to move through. Wow. And so it has been a slow, arduous process as you're going through there to really understand exactly what happens. I think the more banks that take this risk, the more banks that get involved, the better off we all are as a community. I do think when you first start this, there are things that you don't realize and don't know, and you learn along the way, and we've spent 5 years learning how to do this effectively and do it well. And so I think that's that stumbling block for those other banks.
What are some of the lessons learned that Fidelity has learned over this process?
I think back to the earlier comments, this is a cash-intensive business. And banks slowly over time have got out of the cash business. There's not that much cash in the system out there anymore. I think we were a little more well equipped to handle it than most. We are a bank that still makes money services businesses. So I still bank ATM providers and people who own check cashing facilities. So we understood how to handle cash, significant amount of cash. We understood how to really work with the AML, BSA laws to understand and make sure that we didn't have money laundering happening in there. We have a very strong program in that area, and so I think some of these banks see the opportunity there. There is prohibitive cost in this if you're not prepared for it and understand what you're doing. And so it is a stumbling block from a lot of banks who don't realize the unintended consequences of joining.
From a business perspective, is First Fidelity pretty pleased with the results it has seen? Can you talk anything about the number of customers you have thus far?
Sure. Currently, we have approximately 96 accounts in Arizona. We have probably to date 60 or so in Oklahoma as we're moving through the process. But we have finally gotten Oklahoma law down and understand the way these things move, and we're moving through about 20 new accounts a month as we bring them on now. Yeah. So I suspect that will be a significant number very soon. And I think it's going to continue to be a success for First Fidelity and for the clients that we bank, quite frankly.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Christina, let me turn back to you for a moment. What are your options when paying sales tax and other operating expenses in cash? Are there options out there that businesses need to be aware of?
The best way for sales tax, I think the Oklahoma Tax Commission has done a pretty good job of allowing people to come in and pay cash for free. So you can literally walk into the Oklahoma Tax Commission and pay cash for your sales tax or your MMJ tax, withholding tax, which is your payroll. You can also go to Bank First, and I believe it's a $25 charge. You can pay cash at Bank First, and they will send it to the Oklahoma Tax Commission. We have found that in some cases, let's say you want to pay OG&E with your electricity bill, and you want to do it over a card. The preloaded Visa cards at Walmart can be used for that. You can always load them with cash, and then you can pay whatever you need over the internet. You're not going to be sending large sums of money, but it is an option for the smaller bills. And then, of course, if you'd like to go and meet with the IRS, you would need to set up an appointment, and you can walk in and pay them cash with an appointment only. Or you can create a cashier's check and you can mail that cashier's check in. We have done that.
All right, very good. At this point, are there any questions from the audience? Sir, go ahead. Speak up if you can. You can speak up so everyone can hear you. That'd be great.
Yes. I'm wondering if First Fidelity is willing to deal with marijuana dealers. Why don't all of the dealers have an account at First Fidelity?
So I don't want to speak for them. I do think that it's costly. It's not inexpensive to bank with me, or to bank with any bank for that matter. I think that, again, the logistical cost and the regulatory cost that we have is significant. I think there are a lot of licenses in the state of Oklahoma, and there are a lot of incomes coming in from these smaller dispensaries out there, and quite frankly, they don't make a ton of money in some of these places yet. I think as it gets off the ground, as the industry continues to come on, my fees become less, and it becomes more manageable. But I do think that there's a cost to this business, and I think sometimes that cost is prohibitive.
Is that because you charge more for marijuana accounts than for other businesses?
It is, but I also have more oversight, more personnel dedicated to these accounts, more reporting due to the federal government, more cash handling and working through those issues. It is expensive to bank a marijuana account.
Yes, yes, sir. Go ahead. I'll come to you.
My question would be to Christina. I am in this industry, and we're trying to find a bank. I came to hear what Charlie had to say because I've been offered a similar thing from another bank. But I was curious. We're trying to figure out the cash. Do you think that QuickBooks or similar software is appropriate for this kind of thing?
So for a medium size or a small business, yes, I think you can use QuickBooks and be just fine as long as you have some kind of a cash log and you track intricately what cash is moving in and out of that safe. Then you can absolutely load that into QuickBooks. In fact, you can upload it directly in there. You don't even have to enter it yourself.
Sir, did you have a question?
Will the Safe Banking Act allow monies to then cross state lines?
Assuming the individual states have both legalized it, the way I read the act, it should, because the main hang-up right now is on the federal level, and then if you have neighboring states that haven't both legalized it. The Safe Banking Act would effectively remove the federal hurdle, so you'd only have the intrastate conflict at that point. So for us, we border Colorado. You could move money in between the two under the Safe Banking Act.
Yes, sir.
Same restrictions apply to growers, farmers?
Do the same restrictions apply to growers and farmers?
Yeah, if it's marijuana, then yes. If it's hemp, then no. There are different rules for hemp. Yeah.
All right, very good. Yes, sir.
Charlie, let me ask you. Until Susie Simcox came out with the OBA interview that she had, it was First Fidelity wasn't banking it either. You know, what's interesting to me, and I know that you spent quite a bit of time in Arizona and it was legal there before we were. What has the change been? I would venture to say there's probably plenty of banks in here that we won't even say we're banking to hear it. But, we're finding the tier 2s and tier 3s as well, just stumbling upon it. What's been the change in position for both First Fidelity but also for the industry itself?
So I don't know that I think maybe there was an assumption out there. We never came out and said that we wouldn't make it in Oklahoma. That was always our intention and always what we had been willing to do. We did have to wait briefly for the rules to be settled. A lot of people, when it first passed, came out and wanted to bank. We didn't have the rules yet, so it was impossible to bank them without understanding what the state rules are, especially based on FinCEN guidance, which is what we tend to follow, and that says I have to ensure that you are legally licensed to the state. Until I can see that, I didn't even know what the rules were. So as we've gotten those comfortable, as the rules have settled out and we really understood it, then yeah, it becomes easy for us to go ahead and onboard you and create your accounts and get everything moving. That was truly the only change that's happened for us.
Very good. Yes, sir.
I hate to monopolize, but I do have one more question for Mr. Griffin. Licenses for my business are not even available yet. We're a testing lab, and whereas they say that we need one, they won't even return our calls or emails. Could I get an account at your bank without all of that paperwork, or is that just something that would be a non-starter?
No, so as far as I know, as far as I know, they were legalized in according to you as well. So I would want to look at that to truly understand. I think that we have already talked to a couple of labs, so coming on by to have a conversation with is there. I don't want to tell you I understand the particulars right now. I want to make sure that I understand exactly what your position is and understand that we know the licenses are out there. I didn't know that they weren't available to you guys at this point. So, gotcha. Arizona had the same problem. They require testing, and there is no legalized lab in Arizona. So, that was a hurdle we ran into and couldn't move forward. And now they've made some laws to get that done there. So I'm sure the legislature is working on that to make sure that they get those licenses out here. I'd love to talk to you, though. I really would.
Go ahead.
I have a question for you also. What is your wait time right now for approval?
So, to be honest, it was significant to begin with. We didn't have the laws. We got 400 referrals all at the same time. We continue to get new ones every single day. We anticipate those original referrals will be done by end of September. We're working new referrals as they come in as well. So as you come up and you're a brand new referral, it depends mostly on you being able to provide the documentation to us. It could be anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month. Most of that depends on the entity applying to us.
All right, very good. Yes, sir.
I heard that a cash depository warehouse is going to be opened in Oklahoma City for marijuana dealers. Has that occurred?
Anybody heard that?
I have not heard that.
Okay.
I mean, I've heard of those.
Channel 9. They're open.
Okay. I've heard of those type of facilities. I didn't realize any were working here yet.
It's just a vault. It's a vault only. It's not banking services.
You can bring it to my house, that's cool.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
So my question is for Mr. Griffin also. So I come into your facility with a deposit. Are you guys taking cash deposits in your banks? What does that look like? Do I just walk in and like any normal?
So that's the whole purpose. We are trying to do this as safely for us as for everybody else. We do ask at a certain limit that you start to put those in secure bags and put that in the night drop so that you're not carrying cash in the facility. We're not counting it on an open counter in front of you guys. We don't have. It is a cash intensive business. So the last thing we want to do is create any issues for you or for the tellers in the front line. Plus, it's a lot of cash, and it takes time to count as much cash as everyone's bringing in. So at a certain limit, we do ask that you put it in the night drop. We will open the night drop twice a day, count the cash, and then take care of your deposits and take care of your accounts as quickly as we can. But we don't concentrate it, so it is throughout our branch network, so that we don't have it in any one place. We are currently working with an armored car entity that we work with out of Arizona right now. They're moving into the state, and that is probably what we will do once we get them in the state is refer all of our clients to those guys. So they will come to you and pick the cash up and take it to their vault and count it and then tell me what it is. You don't have to transport the cash. We don't have to transport the cash. And we create much more security for you, for the community, for the banks, for everybody else. It becomes safer that way.
These are great questions. Great questions. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
If a marijuana dealer has an account with your bank, are they able to do all the ordinary things that a bank account holder can do, write checks to pay bills, deposit cash, deposit customer checks and all of that?
Everything that any other banking client can do, you can do. So not only those things, but if you want to create ACH to do payroll electronically to your employees, if you want to, you need to wire funds to China because you're purchasing packaging out of China, whatever you need to do, like any other business entity would do, you can do with us.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Mr. Griffin. So I realize that there are so many banks that are afraid to step into this place, into this space, because of the legalities, because of it's illegal issue. So what piece of this, how were you guys able to come to the conclusion, yeah, we want to be in this space, yes, we want to do this, despite the legality of it?
So number one, the Cole memo was a key factor in getting us involved in it. And I know that since then, Cole memo 1 and 2 have both been rescinded. However, during that time period, FinCEN guidance was written for us. And the FinCEN guidance that we got, and was set up very similar to the Cole memo. So basically, those 8 tenets in the Cole memo live on in the FinCEN guidance. I think even though Mr. Sessions pulled back the Cole memos, it still was out there as, he left it up to the U.S. district attorneys to choose whether they were going to get involved and prosecute in this area or not. And that being said, those district attorneys, over and over, I've heard say that they have limited funds, they have limited things that they need to do, and quite frankly, these are legally licensed state entities doing legal banking with a bank, who are paying their taxes, who are being open, who are being transparent in their business, and those district attorneys generally have bad guys they'd rather prosecute than people trying to do the right thing. Now, I will tell you, I don't know that I've seen much happen in that, but I have seen the district attorney still going out and taking action against illegal entities in multiple states. So I do think that we've chosen to step forward with the guidance that we have, trying to do business as legally and as transparently as we can as well, making sure that our federal regulators understand what we're doing, and we've had those conversations with all of our federal regulators, not only in what we're doing, but also in if they'd like to see us do something different to be more compliant. And we continue to work with them on a daily basis to make sure that we can do this in this industry.
So in your 5 years of dealing with this and facing regulators, have you found any pushback from them? Have you found any?
No. Once in a while they actually say, we didn't know that, thanks, that was very educational. And then they kind of move on. And they will not, and I don't think any federal institution can look at you and say, yeah, we approve absolutely of what you're doing. They can't do that. They're a federal institution. So they are very willing to work with us and make sure that we manage the risk that's involved with this as well as we can. And as long as we continue to be upfront with them, we've seen no negative pushback.
No extended scrutiny on your bank as a result of banking this? You feel like you're under a higher level of scrutiny?
I don't think we are, and I don't think we are because we were already in some industries that were fairly high risk. We run ATM servicers and providers, check cashers. So these money services businesses we were already involved in and learned a long time ago. We've done that for years, 20 years, 30 years maybe, how to manage that risk well. And so we've invested in those areas. We've invested in people in those areas and in software in those areas. And I think our regulator sees that and understands that we're managing that risk as well as we can, as well as any bank can probably.
Yes, sir, Dave.
Does everyone who does business with a dispensary, let's say, land on a tier, like a sign maker or a plumber or a website designer? Or is there some sort of line there?
So I think there's always a line there, but I think we have to reach out and understand the business itself. If you read the way the law is written, technically, if a pizza boy drives up and sells a pizza or delivers a pizza to a dispensary, he's marijuana related now because they paid him in cash derived from the sale of marijuana. So I think there's always understanding, and we have to use our judgment and make sure that we understand what their business is, understand how they're doing business, and understand what they're focused on when we open their accounts.
All right. All right. Christina, let me turn to you right quick. For an established and up-and-coming medical marijuana business, what kind of value can an accounting firm bring to an established business like that?
Sure. So basically, we're giving most people back their time. It's very time-consuming, and it's more of an administrative burden to keep up with a very demanding industry when it does come to your bookkeeping. And thank you. I'm sorry. I'll speak louder. So more or less what I'm saying is that it's giving back a lot of time, like most service industries. I know these guys keep you out of jail, and we try to do that as well. We have the other side of that. We make sure that your taxes are paid and you hit every deadline. We run your OMMA reporting analysis. It's pretty much never ending. We more or less take care of your company like it's our own. But we certainly do need your help. We definitely need the owner to be involved in the accounting process.
All right. Thank you, Christina. Well, I think we've covered a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I've learned a lot. I hope you have too. Before we conclude today, I just want to give you a chance for any closing remarks or closing thoughts about the serious issues, the serious banking issues surrounding the medical marijuana business. Any closing remarks or closing thoughts? Any issues we haven't discussed thus far? No? Okay. All right, very good. Well, Jason, Christina, Charles, thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us today. We greatly appreciate it. One last time, put your hands together for our outstanding panel. We are dismissed. Thank you very much.